A few months ago, I went to my friend Dan's house for a weekend. I was excited to catch up. Dan lived in a charming two-story Victorian that reminded me of our childhood. I stepped inside and a chill hit me. It felt odd, but I thought it was just the draft. We settled in to watch a movie, but that chill stayed with me. I couldn't shake the feeling. The next day, it got even weirder. Dan and I were lounging in the living room when we heard a tapping sound. It came from the attic. I glanced at Dan, waiting. He shrugged and said it was probably just rodents. I didn't believe it. That sound felt different. Later, while Dan cooked lunch, I wandered into the basement. It was dark and musty. I stumbled upon an old trunk. It looked like it hadn't been opened in years. Curiosity got the best of me. I opened it and found a journal filled with strange drawings. Each sketch looked wrong, like something out of a nightmare. I felt my heart race as I flipped through the pages filled with odd symbols. It felt like someone was watching, but I pushed that thought aside. That night, we settled in again. I was still on edge. I couldn't stop thinking about the tapping noise from earlier. Suddenly, it started again. This time, it was louder, more aggressive. The sound echoed through the house. Dan and I jumped, our eyes wide in fear. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. Dan nodded, his face paler than before. The banging got worse. It sounded like something was trying to break through. I couldn't move. I wanted to run, but I felt glued to the spot. Then, just like that, it stopped. Silence filled the room, and I could hear my heart pounding. I looked at Dan, hoping for some explanation, but he just stared back, confusion etched on his face. I felt a cold sweat on my neck. "What was that?" I asked. Dan didn't answer. We both just sat there, terrified. Was it in our heads? Or was it that trunk and the journal? I couldn't shake my thoughts as we tried to brush it off and talk about anything else. We decided to go to bed after a while. As I turned off the lights, I heard the sound again. This time, it was right behind me. I spun around. Nothing was there. I couldn't catch my breath. My skin felt clammy. "Did you hear that?" I called out to Dan, who was already in bed. "Yeah," he replied, his voice quiet. I felt uneasy and climbed into bed. Neither of us dared to sleep. We stayed up, trying to ignore the sounds. The rest of the night was filled with silence, but I couldn't help but wonder what I had heard. That weekend at Dan's house left us with unanswered questions. Even now, I still think about what happened. There was something in that house, something that lingered long after we left. I can't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The next week, I couldn't shake the feeling from that weekend. I decided to call Dan. Maybe talking about it would help us both make sense of what happened. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Hey," he replied, his tone flat. "Did you think about that weird sound?" I asked, feeling nervous. "Yeah," he admitted. "I can't stop thinking about it." "You think it's just an old house thing?" I wanted to believe it, but I knew there was more to it. "What about that trunk? I can't get those drawings out of my head. They felt off." There was a pause on the other end. "I don't know. I didn't like that we found it. It felt wrong." I agreed. "Maybe we should go back. There's gotta be something more. Maybe someone else knows about the house." Dan hesitated, then sighed. "Okay, let's do it." We met the following weekend. The drive felt longer than usual. The sun was setting, casting eerie shadows on the road. I felt nervous again, that chill creeping back. When we pulled up to the Victorian, nothing appeared out of the ordinary, but the atmosphere felt thick, like the air was holding its breath. Inside, it looked the same, but the silence felt heavier than before. We headed straight for the basement. I felt uneasy but determined. Knowing the trunk was down there made my pulse quicken. As I walked down the stairs, I noticed a flickering light bulb. It buzzed, echoing in the stillness. I glanced back at Dan, who was close behind. His eyes were wide, reflecting the dim light. When we reached the basement, the trunk was still there, locked tight. I checked my pockets and pulled out the old key I had found in the back of the trunk last time. My hands shook as I inserted the key into the lock. With a click, it opened. Dan and I exchanged a nervous glance. I lifted the lid, and inside was the same journal, its pages slightly yellowed from age. My heart raced as I thumbed through it again. The drawings looked even creepier in the dim light. The symbols seemed to twist and shift in front of my eyes. Just then, I heard something above us. It was that tapping sound again, but it was faster and more frantic this time. I glanced up, my heart hammering in my chest. "Dan, do you hear that?" I stammered. He nodded, fear etched on his face. "What is it?" "I don't know." Looking around, I felt the walls closing in. With every tap, I could feel something building inside the house. Then, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. The journal shimmered oddly. I turned back, just in time to see a shadow moving across the room, darting behind the trunk. My breath caught in my throat. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Dan looked over at me, and I could see the panic rising in his eyes. "We need to get out of here." But before we could move, the tapping stopped. In the silence that followed, something whispered my name, a voice I didn't recognize, but it filled me with dread. "Run!" I shouted, and we bolted for the stairs. But just as we turned to leave, I found myself frozen. That voice was clearer now, echoing in my mind. I could feel it pulling me back, urging me to learn the truth. Then, everything went dark. I awoke on the basement floor, my head pounding. I blinked rapidly, trying to shake off the fog. Dan was next to me, stirring but still out of it. I sat up, scanning the room. The dim light flickered above, casting quivering shadows on the walls. "What happened?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "I don't know," Dan groaned. "One second we were running, and then nothing." I rubbed my eyes and remembered that whisper, like a dark cloud hanging over us. "We need to get out of here." I helped Dan to his feet. He wobbled slightly, and I steadied him. "What's in the journal?" he asked, his brows knitted together. "Did you read more?" I barely got through a few pages. It felt like the drawings were watching us. My stomach twisted at the thought. "We should check it." Dan hesitated, wary. "You think it's safe?" "It can't be worse than whatever's lurking around," I pointed out. He nodded reluctantly, and we moved back to where the journal lay open on the trunk. As I scanned the pages, my heart sank. The ink was smudged, as if something had run down the paper. But then I noticed a new drawing. It was a map of the house, but there were additional markings. Red X's in the basement and the attic, and several scribbles that looked like names. This doesn't make sense. What are these X's for? The attic is where the roof meets the walls. No one goes up there, Dan pondered aloud. What could possibly be so important? Every instinct told me to leave, but a wild curiosity pushed me to explore further. We need to find out what's up there. Maybe it connects to the trunk somehow. Dan frowned. "I don't like this." "I know, but if it's tied to whatever's haunting this place, we have to see it." With heavy hearts, we made our way up the stairs, the house creaking around us, protesting our presence. Each footstep echoed loudly, amplifying the dread in my chest. Reaching the door to the attic, my palms felt clammy. I fished out the old key again, a strange nostalgia washing over me. It felt like it belonged to another time, another story. As I inserted the key, the creaking of the door sent chills running down my spine. It swung open with a dull thud, revealing a dark, cluttered space littered with old furniture. In the far corner, something sparkled under layers of dust, catching the faint light from a nearby window. "What is that?" Dan asked, squinting into the darkness. "I don't know," I replied, stepping cautiously inside. My heart raced at the thought of what secrets lay hidden. I moved toward the glint, bent down, and brushed off the dust. That's when I saw it. A tarnished bracelet with strange symbols etched into the surface. My fingers trembled as I picked it up, a sudden pulse of energy rushing through me. "Is something wrong?" Dan's voice came from behind, but I couldn't respond. I felt a presence, cold and heavy, lurking just beyond our sight. Then I heard it again, that whisper, "Find me." The walls shook slightly, and the trembling grew stronger. We weren't alone. "Dan, we need to leave now!" I shouted, fear gripping my heart. As I turned to leave, I saw it. A dark figure standing in the shadows, watching us. The air felt electric, and my breath froze in my throat. I dropped the bracelet, but it didn't clatter. It simply vanished. "Someone's here," I whispered, my pulse racing faster than ever. The figure stepped forward, and everything blurred. I could only think of one thing. We needed to run. My instincts kicked in, and I grabbed Dan's arm, pulling him toward the attic door. His eyes were wide, reflecting the fear that gripped me. The figure in the shadows seemed to hover, no longer just a shape, but a tangible, creeping dread. "Run!" I yelled, shoving Dan ahead of me. As I turned to leave, I saw it. A dark figure standing in the shadows, watching us. The air felt electric, and my breath froze in my throat. I dropped the bracelet, but it didn't clatter. It simply vanished. "Someone's here," I whispered, my pulse racing faster than ever. The figure stepped forward, and everything blurred. I could only think of one thing. We needed to run. My instincts kicked in, and I grabbed Dan's arm, pulling him toward the attic door. His eyes were wide, reflecting the fear that gripped me. The figure in the shadows seemed to hover, no longer just a shape, but a tangible, creeping dread. "Run!" I yelled, shoving Dan ahead of me. We stumbled down the stairs, each thud of our feet reverberating through the house, seemingly awakening something dormant. I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in on us, hungry for our fear. We reached the bottom and dashed for the exit, but the front door wouldn't budge. I yanked the handle frantically, panic flooding my veins. "It won't open!" "Try the back! We can make it!" Dan shouted, his voice high and strained. We turned and bolted toward the kitchen. My heart raced louder than ever as we burst through the door, barely catching sight of the twilight sky. But that's when the whisper returned, sharper and more demanding. "Find me." It echoed around us, wrapping itself around me like a suffocating shroud. We sprinted through the yard, desperate to escape whatever dark presence lurked inside the house. My breath came in short gasps as I shouted, "Where do we go? What do we do?" "Let's find something to defend ourselves, the shed," Dan replied, veering to the side. I followed him, the adrenaline coursing through my veins, unwilling to question why we thought that was a good idea. We skidded to a halt in front of the shed. The door creaked open, revealing an assortment of old tools, cobwebs, and forgotten oddities. I picked up a rusty shovel, feeling the weight of it in my hands. "This will have to do," I murmured, glancing at Dan, who had found an old baseball bat. "Hopefully, it's enough," he said, his voice trembling. Suddenly, the air shifted. A chill swept through the yard, and the whisper came again, now closer, more intense. "Find me." "What does it want?" Dan stammered, gripping the bat tightly. My thoughts raced, trying to piece it all together. "Maybe it wants the bracelet," I said, memory flickering back to the attic. "It's tied to whatever that thing is." Dan's face paled. "You dropped it! Remember, it vanished!" Before I could respond, the shadow emerged again, closer now, its edges defined, yet ever shifting. We stood frozen, the shed feeling more like a trap than a refuge. "What if it's tied to the house?" I whispered, terrified of the implications. The figure moved, gliding closer, and I could see now that it had no clear shape, only a swirl of darkness that ebbed and flowed with the breeze. "Run!" Dan yelled, breaking the spell. He darted back toward the house, and I followed blindly, the shovel gripped tightly in my hand. The whisper crescendoed, wrapping around us like a hunt. Inside the house, everything seemed to amplify. The creaking floorboards, the distant echoes of our own breaths, and the insistent whispers, all clawing at my sanity. Desperation mounted. "Where's the journal?" I asked, scanning the room. It could hold more answers. Dan hurriedly scanned the table. "It's gone. What if it was connected to that bracelet too?" "I think it is," I replied. But before I could finish, the figure loomed in the hallway, blocking our escape. Its presence felt consuming, the very air thickening with dread. I realized we were trapped, and whatever this thing was, it wasn't done with us yet. "What do we do?" Dan whispered, backing away. "We face it," I replied, heart pounding. This was no longer just about survival. It was about confronting whatever darkness had been unleashed upon us. But as the tendrils of darkness reached toward us, I knew it was only the beginning. The darkness surged forward, twisting and writhing as if it were alive. I raised the shovel, ready to strike, but my hands trembled. Dan stood beside me, the baseball bat raised, both of us unsure of how to fight something we couldn't even touch. "Stay close," I whispered, though it felt pointless. We were stuck in a nightmarish loop. The whisper seemed to echo louder now. "Find me." A voice wrapped in malice and despair. The figure's form twisted, expanding and contracting, drawing nearer with every passing second. My mind raced with thoughts of the attic and that ominous bracelet. What had we unleashed? "We need to get to the attic," I yelled. "The bracelet, it might be the key to stopping this." Dan glanced at me, fear evident in his eyes. "But it's there." The shadow loomed closer, almost breathing down our necks. "I don't care. It has to be there," I insisted. We had nothing left but hope and desperation. We darted up the stairs, breathless. The atmosphere in the house felt charged, the walls seemingly alive with a malevolent energy. As I took 2 steps at once, the whisper escalated into an almost deafening chorus. "Find me! Find me!" The attic door swung open with a creak as if it had been waiting for us. I stepped inside, scanning the dimly lit space. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light filtering through the cracks. The air smelled stale, heavy with memories that tingled at the back of my mind. "Where's the bracelet?" I muttered, the panic rising again. I searched the room, tossing aside boxes filled with forgotten trinkets. Dan rummaged through an old chest, his frantic movements making the shadows appear to flicker in response. Then I spotted an old trunk against the wall. Its hinges rusted, yet strangely inviting. "Check that," I urged. Dan rushed over, wrenching the trunk open. Inside, among faded photographs and brittle papers, I saw it, the bracelet, glinting as if it had a life of its own. I reached for it, but the moment my fingers brushed against it, the room fell to an eerie silence. Everything went still. "Did you hear that?" Dan whispered, his gaze darting around. The shadows receded slightly, almost as if they were waiting. Before I could respond, the whisper returned, but it was different now. It was clearer, almost pleading. "Return it." "What?" My heart sank as I looked at the bracelet. "It's asking for it back?" "I don't think it wants us to have it," Dan said, his voice wavering. The darkness gathered in the corners, pushing against the walls, as if it were ready to lunge at us. The pressure built, and I felt the room vibrating with a strange energy. That's when I saw it, a flicker of light emerging from the shadows. It pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat, illuminating the space just enough to reveal a figure trapped within the gloom. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. The figure looked familiar. It was framed in agony, its mouth opening and closing as though trying to speak. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice barely audible over the thrumming silence. "Help me," it whispered, but the voice didn't seem to belong to anyone we knew. Before I could react, the shadows surged, threatening to engulf us. Everything became chaotic. Darkness filled my vision. I stumbled back, knocking over a stack of boxes, and the moment felt like it stretched on forever. "Dan!" I shouted, my panic rising again, but my voice was lost in the churning void. Then, everything went dark. I jolted awake, gasping for air, the attic around me fading back into focus. Dan lay sprawled a few feet away, his eyes wide with shock. I could see fear skimming the surface of his expression, mirroring my own panic. "Are we dead?" croaked, his voice barely louder than a whisper. I pushed myself up, rubbing my head where I'd hit it on something. "I don't know, but we need to move." The dim light from the cracks in the walls flickered. Shadows twisted and morphed as they settled back into their corners, but the heavy air pulsed with an unsettling energy. My gaze landed on the bracelet, still sitting in the trunk. It gleamed ominously, as if alive and aware. "Dan, the bracelet!" I pointed. "We have to take it." "Do we? I mean, it could be what's causing this, right?" He hesitated, still reluctant. I shook my head. "Maybe, but it also seems like it's trying to tell us something." As I reached for the bracelet, the air in the attic shifted. A gentle breeze swept through the room, even though the windows had been sealed shut. The whispers returned, but this time they formed words, wrapping around us like cold silk. "Return, return." "Stop!" I yelled, pulling back. I held on to the edge of the trunk, as if afraid the house itself might throw me off balance. "What if it wants us to return it to someone?" Dan suggested, voice trembling. "What if it belongs to—" Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut with a thunderous bang. My heart raced as I glanced at the door, the shadows swirling violently like a tempest. "We're trapped," I breathed, panic rising in my throat. "What now?" Before Dan could answer, the silhouette of that familiar figure reappeared, emerging from the thick haze of shadows. This time, the face was clearer, twisted in anguish, but closer to human. The light pulsed with its every movement. "Help me!" the figure cried, its voice echoing around the attic, wrapping around us with an unyielding grip. My heart sank. I recognized it now. It reminded me of a girl from school, someone I hadn't thought of in years. A rumor had circulated that she'd vanished without a trace, but nobody had ever known what really happened to her. Her name flashed in my mind like a warning light. "Sarah." "Sarah?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Is that you?" The figure jerked forward, hands reaching out as if begging for release. "They won't let me go." "What do you mean? Who won't?" I stepped forward, almost instinctively, despite Dan pulling me back. The shadows around us seemed to tighten, clawing at the edges of my mind. "You're in danger! Get out before it's too late!" "Wait!" I shouted, the urgency in her words slicing through my panic. "What do we need to do?" Her mouth opened, but the words were lost as the shadows surged again, swallowing her back into the darkness. "Dan!" I cried, my voice cracking. "We need to break that hold. We have to find out what happened to her. It's the key." With a newfound determination, I reached for the bracelet again. It felt warm against my skin, and the whispers calmed. Momentarily, as if recognizing my intent, but just as hope flickered in my chest, I heard footsteps creaking on the stairs. Someone was in the house. The footsteps grew louder, sending a wave of dread crashing over me. I exchanged a quick glance with Dan. His eyes widened, panic etched across his face. "Who could it be?" he whispered, as if speaking too loudly would summon whatever was lurking below. "I don't know," I replied, my heart pounding in my ears, "but we need to hide." We scrambled behind the trunk, squeezing ourselves into the small space between it and the wall. The attic was quiet now, the whispers having faded into an ominous silence. I could barely see Dan, but I felt his presence close by, our breaths mingling in the stale air. The footsteps continued to creep up the stairs, slow and deliberate. A shadow crossed the bottom of the attic door, then stopped. My chest tightened as I strained to listen. I could hear a voice, muffled, low. "Not up here." The words sent chills down my spine. Someone was looking for us, and they had no intention of leaving empty-handed. I glanced at Dan, whose face was pale. "What do we do?" he mouthed, his eyes darting around the attic, desperate for an escape. Then an unexpected voice echoed from below. It wasn't aggressive or threatening, but it was full of an unusual urgency. "Sarah, where are you?" It caught me off guard. Who was calling for her? I tried to piece it together, meeting the weight of Dan's wide-eyed gaze. It had to be someone who knew her, someone trying to find her. I wanted to yell out that we were here, but the fear of making our situation worse held me back. The footsteps resumed, this time retreating. I waited until I was sure they were gone before exhaling shakily. "We can't just sit here. We need to find a way to get out and see who that was." Dan nodded, still trembling. He glanced around the attic, eyes landing on the window. What if we could climb out? The window was tiny, but if we could squeeze through, and if we could trust what we thought we saw outside the last time, we might have a chance. "Okay," I said, scrambling to my feet. "Let's do it." As we crept toward the window, my fingers brushed against the trunk again. The warmth of the bracelet pulsed against my palm, urging me to take it. But I couldn't let it distract me now. We were too close to freedom. I gripped the window frame, ready to push it open, when suddenly I heard the unmistakable sound of a door slamming in the house below. I froze mid-motion. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my heart racing again. "Yeah," Dan breathed, eyes wide with terror. "Maybe they're looking upstairs." But then I heard the voice again, this time nearer and clearer. "I know you're up there. You can't hide forever." I glanced at Dan. "We have to go, now." Just as I reached for the window, I saw something out of the corner of my eye, a glimmer from the trunk. It was the bracelet, catching the fading light from the attic. "Wait!" Dan pulled me back. "What if it's part of this? What if—" But there was no time left. I could feel whatever force was at play tightening like a noose around us. I climbed through the window, desperation propelling me forward. Just as I was about to pull Dan after me, I heard the attic door open. "Get back!" And then everything went dark. I gasped as the darkness enveloped me. I felt weightless, like I was falling through an endless void. There was no sound, no light, just a suffocating blackness. I couldn't tell if I was still in the attic or somewhere else entirely. "Dan!" My voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. I tried to reach out to find him, but my hands met nothing but air. Panic surged inside me. Then, just as quickly as it had started, I felt a jolt. Light pierced through the dark, flooding my vision. I squinted, disoriented. When my eyes adjusted, I found myself sprawled on the ground. I blinked a few times, taking in my surroundings. "It's just a yard," I muttered, confusion hitting me hard. We seemed to have dropped from the attic into my friend's backyard. The moon hung high, casting eerie shadows across the grass, but it felt strangely calm here. "Sarah!" Dan's voice broke through the stillness. He rushed over, his face a mask of worry. "Are you okay?" "I think so." I sat up, shaking off the residual fear. "What just happened?" "I don't know, but we have to get out of here. I just heard something in the house." His eyes darted toward the back door, which stood ajar, the creaking sound of it swaying lightly in the wind. Just then, a rustle in the bushes made my heart skip. I clutched Dan's arm. "Did you hear that?" "Yeah." Dan's voice trembled. "Maybe they came back. We shouldn't wait around." With unsteadiness in our legs, we started to creep toward the side of the house, aiming for the fence that bordered the property. But as we walked, I noticed something shiny in the grass. I bent down, my curiosity piqued. It was the bracelet I had felt earlier in the attic, its stones shimmering even under the dim moonlight. "Sarah, leave it," Dan urged. "We need to go." But I couldn't help myself. I picked it up and felt a wave wash over me, a clarity mingled with warmth. "It's strange," I murmured, holding it up for him to see. "It must have some kind of significance." "Put it down," he insisted, his eyes wide with fear. "What if that's what brought us here? We don't know what it does." "Maybe it's a clue." I hesitated, my fingers tracing the stones, each one whispering secrets I couldn't quite grasp. That's when I heard it again, the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching the back door, this time accompanied by a low voice. "I know you're out there. We can hear you." I froze. My mind raced. Whatever was chasing us hadn't given up. "We have to hide," I whispered urgently, glancing around for cover. "We can't." Dan pulled me away from the house. "Let's get over the fence, now." Fear propelled us forward. We sprinted toward the fence, the bracelet clattering against my side with each step. Just as we reached the top, the door swung open with a loud creak, revealing a shadowy figure silhouetted against the light. "Stop! You can't escape!" And then, in an instant, everything shifted again. My surroundings blurred, and I was pulled into another dark abyss. I felt weightless again, and my last thought was, what have I gotten us into? I landed with a thud, the ground beneath me solid yet foreign. I jolted upright, breathing heavily, scanning my surroundings. This time, I was in what looked like a dimly lit basement. "Dan?" I called, dread twisting in my stomach. My voice echoed softly in the confined space. I didn't have to wait long. A muffled rustle came from the shadows. "I'm here, over by the stairs." He emerged, his face pale and eyes wide. "We really need to find a way out of here." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. Where even are we? The attic? The yard? Now a basement? I don't know, but we have to keep moving. His voice held a shaky urgency. He pointed toward the far side of the basement, where a small window glimmered half hidden by cobwebs. "There, we can try that." I felt the bracelet cool in my pocket, a stark contrast to the warm panic bubbling inside me. We just need to get out, right? We can worry about everything else later. As we hurried toward the window, I noticed a flickering light near the far wall. It was a bulb swinging from a single wire, barely illuminating the cluttered space. Old furniture and dusty boxes littered the floor, creating treacherous obstacles. "Watch your step," Dan hissed as he stumbled over a broken chair leg. I grabbed his arm to steady him, careful not to trip myself. But as we approached the window, my instincts screamed danger. "Dan, wait!" I pulled him back, just as I spotted something lurking in the shadows. A figure, cloaked in darkness, watching us. "Who's there?" I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady. My heart raced again, pounding violently against my chest. "Did you think you could get away that easily?" The voice was low and dripping with malice. It sent chills down my spine. "What do you want?" Dan snapped, stepping in front of me instinctively. The figure stepped closer, revealing a gaunt face, its eyes gleaming like a predator's. "You disturbed something. You shouldn't have." Now you'll pay the price." What had we done? I felt a rush of regret flooding me. The bracelet. Had that been the trigger? I looked at Dan, panic written all over his face. "We need to go, now!" "Run!" Dan shouted, and we bolted toward the staircase. As we reached the steps, I turned back for just a second. The figure was following, its movement swift and unnatural. Just as we reached the top and flung open the door, I heard it scream, the sound a mixture of rage and hunger. We stumbled into what appeared to be another backyard, but it felt off, wrong. The night was too quiet, an eerie stillness enveloping us. The moon hung menacingly overhead, casting strange shadows that flickered like spirits. "This isn't right," I said, looking around wildly. "Where are we now?" Dan's eyes scanned the area. "It feels like another world," he muttered, bewildered. Just then, a glimmer caught my eye. The same bracelet in my hand, the one I thought I had lost. But this version looked different, darker, jagged. That's when it hit me, I stammered, realization crashing over me. What if this is all connected? The house, the bracelet? But before I could finish my thought, the ground shook. Something began to rise from the depths of the earth, shadows twisting into forms I couldn't comprehend. "Sarah, we have to move," Dan yelled, pulling me toward the fence that lined this new property. Just as we tried to escape, I felt a hand grip my shoulder tightly. The figure had followed us. "You can't leave," it hissed. My breath caught in my throat. I knew in that moment there was no escaping whatever we had awakened. The figure lunged at us, its shadow stretching across the ground like a dark omen reaching for our very souls. With a surge of adrenaline, I yanked Dan away just as the icy fingers grazed my back. The grip of fear tightened around my chest, pushing me to move faster, harder. "This way," I yelled, darting toward a cluster of trees at the edge of the yard, desperate to find cover. We stumbled through the underbrush, colliding into the thick foliage, the whispers echoing in my ears as the darkness surged behind us. "We have to find a way out," Dan shouted breathlessly, glancing back as we ran. "Whatever we woke up wants us for a reason." "It's not just the house," I said, trying to catch my breath. "It's the bracelet too. I feel it pulling, like it knows something." As soon as the words left my mouth, a heavy weight slammed into me, a presence drawn from the depths of the dark house. I staggered, grappling to maintain my balance. "Dan!" "Keep going," he urged, as we veered left, losing sight of where the figure had last been. I could feel the energy shifting around us. Something was different, almost suffocating. The air crackled, and I thought I could... We can hear the distant echo of voices again, murmuring indistinctly through the haze of panic. "We can't keep running forever! We need answers!" I shouted, the urgency rising in my voice. "Up ahead!" Dan pointed toward what looked like an old shed, its weathered wood barely visible in the moonlight. We made our way to it, adrenaline masking fatigue. The whispers grew louder as we neared, the dark tendrils of our pursuer creeping behind us. Inside, it was cramped and dark, but we had no choice. Dan pushed the door shut just as I heard something scrape against the wood. It bounced off. The rustling was relentless, desperate to get in. "What now?" he gasped, scanning the room for anything that could help. "Look," I said, spotting a small window covered in dust. "If we can get up there, we might be able to escape." Together, we quickly cleared debris, our hearts racing as the sound of scratching grew louder outside. But as I grabbed onto the edge of the window frame, that feeling, the pull, grew stronger. I hesitated a moment, looking back at Dan, who was starting to lose hope. The bracelet. It's always tied to this, I murmured, the revelation sending chills down my spine. Stop! Don't touch it, Dan said urgently. Whatever it is, I have to. Ignoring the voice of caution in my mind, I pulled the bracelet out from my pocket, holding it in the dim light. It shimmered, and instantly the scratching noise ceased. What are you doing? Dan's tone was desperate, eyes darting toward the door. A flood of memories struck me, of laughter and whispers, of the girl from the shadows, Sarah. I gasped. It has to go back. I pushed my way to the door, feeling the energy shift again, the room pulsing with life. If it's healing or binding something, it's worth it. Are you crazy? We don't know what's waiting out there. But there was something in Dan's eyes. He trusted me, just enough to follow. I flung the door open, the remains of a dark presence swirling outside. To my surprise, it licked at the edges of the daylight. This way, I shouted, plunging out into the night. The moment we stepped into the cool air, the voices shifted again, directionless and frustrated. Just throw it, Dan yelled, his voice barely piercing through the oncoming chaos. Sarah! I called into the void, holding the bracelet above my head. The darkness congealed momentarily, and from the shadows I saw her figure, clearer now, thrumming with energy and despair. Return it, she pleaded, her eyes wide with desperation. I stepped forward, feeling the earth tremble beneath me. A shaky breath escaped my lips as I released the bracelet, letting it fall toward her. In an instant, it wove through the shadows and into her waiting hands. Light exploded all around us, filling the empty spaces and scattering the darkness. The howls of rage rang out around us, mixing with the night air as a wave of warmth flooded the yard. The entity that had pursued us screeched, unwilling to relinquish its grip. Go, now! Dan shouted as the shadows shrank back, caught in a battle between light and darkness. We ran, dodging through thinning tendrils of black, the whispers fading behind us as if the darkness knew it was losing. The yard stretched out before us, the boundary where shadows met the light, each step forward gaining strength against the pull. As the last of the whispers died away, I took a moment to look back at the scene. Sarah's figure smiled gently as she faded into the light, leaving behind a faint spark of hope. We stumbled away from the house, feeling the air lighten with every step. The anxiety still lingered, though. What had we awakened? What about those still trapped? In the back of my mind, I knew the answers wouldn't come too easily, but we were free, for now. I glanced at Dan, who was breathing heavily beside me, his eyes filled with unshed fear. Even with safety in sight, an unease pressed at the edges of my thoughts. This isn't over, is it? He asked, the question hanging heavily between us. I don't think so, I replied, a shiver dancing down my spine. It changed how I saw everything now, and the lingering questions were unsettling. As dawn broke, painting the sky with warmth, I couldn't help but think about the mysteries left behind, about Sarah and the shadows still lurking somewhere between the veil of existence. We may have escaped, but the story was far from finished. Months would slip by and life would grow busy again, but somehow I knew I'd never shake the feeling that something remained in the silence of that old Victorian, lingering, whispering for answers still unclaimed.